Jan, good morning.
Morning, Jeff. Good to see you.
Always a pleasure. Now, once again, we're really going quite well in this terms of this relationship. Episode 6 of the Growth Ripples podcast. I'm going to say it again. When are we going to sign up that wave? I'm waiting for a wave, Jan.
Well, these waves can take some time, but you got to keep stirring and getting the ripples going, and I think the wave will come. You just got to believe in the process, I think, Jeff. And with you partnering with me on this, I think we're going to get there.
Got it. And I think you're growing a bit of a moustache there for November, I believe.
That's right. Yeah. So I try. This is my 14th year actually of doing Movember. So I like to try to raise funds, for mental health initiatives and also suicide prevention, something close to my heart. So yeah, I do this every year. And if anyone wants to donate, if you're watching this in November, there will be links on my LinkedIn. But yeah,
Yeah,
hopefully
and
people
we'll,
get
and we'll
behind
drop
it.
the link onto the below of this videos too, or this podcast when it comes out.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jeff.
Brilliant. So, Jan, we did another interesting survey
Mhm.
and a bit of a time break. I think I think the key one
Yeah.
here was that your audience wants to be surprised.
That's right. So yeah, we did the one about bullying and what to do if you are bullied at work, and then the other one that was a complete split each way was surprise them. So yeah, we sort of had a bit of a discussion, didn't we, Jeff? Do you want to
Indeed,
share
indeed.
kind of how we came to what we came to?
Yeah. So, Jan and I had a bit of a chat. We thought to ourselves, what's something that's very current, very relevant in today's business environment? And, I think it's been relevant for quite some time now.
Mm-hmm.
Naturally, as organizations get larger and larger and the pursuit of growth becomes paramount, organizations need to bring a lot of hiring, and that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But on the opposite side of things, when things go for a bit of a change, we get restructures, we get
Mm-hmm.
rifts, or in other words, reductions in force. Now, there are many ways to approach this, but I understand, Jan, from your element, you're very much interested in how organizations should approach restructurings or reductions in force from a people element, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And in particular, building on that, I mean, the people, but in a sustainable way. So
Mm,
maybe even just to call out early, one thing which I've heard, I haven't completely verified it, but I've seen it from a number of sources. But say with Twitter, I hear that Elon Musk has, cut, 50% thereabouts of the workforce. But then at the same time, I'm also hearing reports that he is also asking, well, his leaders are asking people to suddenly come back and get rehired because
wow.
what that suggests to me, if those allegations or if those reports are true, is that they haven't done their due diligence about, well, what do they need long term? And we're hearing in reports of advertisers going, well, hang on, you're not going to properly moderate the platform, which yeah, we believe in freedom of speech, but often that has to come within parameters like, well, responsibility, and are people going to
Mm,
be verified so that actually they're talking about the right person. There was even a report that someone got verified as being Elon Musk and started writing stuff, and then they got shut down and blocked from it. So it does raise questions about, the organization itself, but I think this is much broader than just Twitter or broader than Elon Musk. This is about organizations through their cycles. They will at different times need to likely increase and also decrease in the number of headcount or
mm.
employees that they have. That's just kind of natural. It's not good or bad. It's just that's part of the cycle of organizations. And if organizations take reasonable risks, take reasonable risk at taking new products or services, some will work out and some will be booming, but others naturally won't. That's just again like the law of probabilities, if you like. So in organizations that I've worked with, either internally or partnered with, there's always been a time where they've had to reduce the amount of employees that they have.
Mm.
Now, the thing that I'm most interested in about is how do you do that sustainably? How do you do that for people, but not just in the short term, but also the longer term? Because what I'm seeing, and if again we use the example of Twitter, reports of people getting fired or made redundant by email, which is just a horrible way to have that happen to you, especially if you've worked there for a period of time. I mean, any period of time that's bad, but that's just human decency in my mind. And what is the flow on effect? Sure, you might save some money and some time as opposed to getting people into the office, doing it
Mm.
face to face, one on one, or something like that. But what are you actually missing out on the opportunity cost? What you're going to have is people that are going to badmouth your organization. They're not going to use your platform. They're not going to want to work for you in the future. And maybe they even want to help competitors against you. So the very thing that they're probably trying to have happen, and as in make a sustainable company that will increase in growth rather than decline, they're actually sort of feeding into their own fears. And this is what I sometimes see organizations and leaders do if they're not conscious and deliberate about the steps that they want to take or need to take. So there's almost a pre-step about, well, okay, you've worked out, and I'm not going to judge, whether Twitter needed to reduce in size or not. I don't know. I'm not close enough to the everyday to make that call. But it sounds like from an outsider's perspective, they failed at the first step, which is, well, for the future, what roles and skills and experience do they actually need? That's always the first step.
It's very fundamental, isn't it?
Exactly. And that's not even about people. That's just about the organization. How does the organization continue to operate into the future unless you have the skills and the experience that you need? So that's number one. Once you got that, let's assume you've worked that out. You've kind of done a mapping, and then, okay, who've got those skills, who don't? And then you kind of identify who are the ones that actually need to be moved on or found other roles, if maybe there's other roles that they could be fit for within the organization or the conglomerate, if it's, much bigger than one organization. But then when it comes to the people, this is where sometimes organizations skimp. And this is, I think, a really bad call. So instead of it seeing it as a cost to sit down with your people and say, look, we've got some news, and being open and transparent about what's happening, you're actually shooting yourself in the foot if you choose to get rid of people via email, via text, by just a phone call, even just a Zoom. Now, it's not always popular. It's not always possible in our, remote way of working now. Like, you can't always get everyone in the one space.
And obviously, organizations right now are quite substantial in size.
Absolutely.
You are. Yeah.
Yep. But I would argue that there's always an opportunity to do something one-on-one. So whether it's Zoom, whether it's whatever, and however much time that takes, to me, that's an investment rather than a cost. Because what you're actually investing in is you're investing in people feeling that they were listened to, they were heard, that they had someone empathetic saying, look, I know this is not going to be an easy message to take, but this is where we're at as an organization, and this is why we need to do this. It's not personal. This is about what's going to make things progress so that we can still have an organization, and we want you to be successful. It might not be here or won't be here in this current role, but we want you to be successful. And that message, that sort of flow of conversation does a world of good. So then you actually have, and I've seen it on LinkedIn where someone said, I was let go today. However, I'll always be an advocate for business X or leader Y because of the way they treated me on my way out. So that's number one. Number two, the benefit it gives you is those people that are left, and some people talk about this being like the survivors. And I know that's a bit dramatic, but sometimes there's something called survival guilt. So, I wasn't let go, but my best workmate was, or my, this person sitting next to me doing exactly the same job, and I think maybe they were even better than me, but I shouldn't have been, here's my imposter syndrome sort of coming in. So that can pop up. But what those survivors, if we use that term just briefly, what they can feel is like, and they notice that's how my colleague was treated. They were emailed, they were fired via email. They weren't given a conversation. They're talking badly about my company now. Like, how is that going to impact their engagement, their level of commitment to the organization? Probably not very well. And I wouldn't be surprised if even those that have remained at Twitter, because of what they've seen or heard or read about, that they're seriously thinking about getting employment elsewhere. And it's a real opportunity for organizations that need those skills to actually target disgruntled survivors, if you like, within Twitter as a pure example. Now, I want to maybe pivot a little bit, Jeff, to a specific scenario and maybe just brings it to life for people. I was involved, I worked for one of the big Australian banks many years ago, and they needed to, or they decided that they were closing down and downsizing a call center in another state. Now, I'm not going to say that we did it perfectly, but what we did do, I'm quite proud of, because I was part of the HR team at the time. And we flew all HR people that were supporting that particular call center. So I was based in Sydney. The call center was in Brisbane, I believe, or just outside of Brisbane. And we flew everyone into the location. We had the senior leaders that weren't based there fly in. We had the conversations
Wow.
first at a group level. So everyone having a group conversation about why we were doing what we were doing. And then everyone impacted, we had a one-on-one conversation with that person. We also had in there EAP, which is Employment Assistance Program. So these people are trained psychologists. We had them on site. So we gave people the opportunity, if they were struggling mentally from what had just happened, the uncertainty about not being employed, etc., we gave them the opportunity to speak straight away to somebody because we had a number of people there on site. And then we gave them details that they can continue to access that service for, I think it was 3 months, but it was a period of time that they could access that at no cost to them. We also gave them outplacement services, which means dedicated service providers that will help you with your resume, interviewing skills, because some of these individuals had never worked anywhere else in their professional careers. And they were worried about, oh, how do I even do a job interview? I've never even done a resume. I just walked into the branch and suddenly I'm here now at the call center.
Wow.
So
Basically,
this is how
given the
you
skills for after.
absolutely. And so again, I'm sure there were people that were aggrieved and there were people that were disappointed in what happened. However, I do believe that the majority of them would have walked away from that and gone, well, look, I may not have a job, but at least they treated me with dignity. And these are the people that are probably also looking at things that are happening today, both in Australia and in the US and other parts of the world, and going, gee, I'm glad whatever, Elon or whoever, I'm glad they didn't do that when I was, leaving that bank. So again, not perfect, but I think taking those fundamental steps, and yes, there's a cost to it, but again, I think we got to flip that view of it being a cost, and actually, it's an investment in someone's brand as a company, their reputation, and their clients. Because often, and Twitter is a perfect example, but so are banks. Who are your clients? They're the everyday mom and dads, everyday
People.
kids. They're people,
Just
exactly.
people.
So we got to treat people as people. It's not rocket science, but I'm
It's common
blown
courtesy,
away.
right? Just simple common courtesy, yeah?
Exactly. But again, I think this is something that we've spoken about before, Jeff. I know that, and why people like me are in business is because unfortunately, common sense and common courtesy is not common practice. So if people want to kind of learn how to kind of do it right, that's where, people like myself, but there's lots of others out there that do great work in this space. We can help. Because we're in a situation. So I'm not going to blame leaders. They're in stressful situations. They have to make some tough
You got to
calls
make
for
a
their business.
call.
Yeah, and
That's
some
true.
just want to move on and do it as quickly as possible. But all I ask is people just pause for a moment and go, hang on, okay, I'm making a business decision, but I'm impacting an individual, a person, and thinking about what would that be like if you were that individual. Not always easy to do, but if we can think about it from that perspective, chances are we're going to result in a much better process and a much better outcome in the longer term.
Fantastic. And you know what's interesting, Jan? For organizations and leaders out there, it sort of brings a circle in terms of the name of this podcast, Growth Ripples, and potential how it can create waves. So when you think about it, organizations, leaders, you have a choice. You can create a ripple that turns into a wave, and it can be a positive one.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you approach people in the right way.
That we talked about, Jeff.
Interesting.
Tsunamis don't all have to be bad, but if we have
exactly
the groundswell, then I think we can actually get some positive change in organizations. Like we've talked about bullying, like we've talked about harassment and discrimination. In the same way, if we're restructuring an organization, actually create a positive wave, a positive tsunami for the community, for the customers, and also for employees.
Fantastic, Jan. An absolute pleasure to speak with you again.
Thanks, Jeff.